The galaxy was burning and nobody knew how to stop it. Ambassador Lyran stood in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, her silver hands trembling as she watched the display screens. Each one showed another world dying. The beautiful crystal cities of Valthor Prime were now piles of ash. The floating gardens of Kelrath had fallen silent. 23 colonies had gone dark in the last month alone. 23 worlds where billions of people had lived, worked, and dreamed of peaceful futures, all gone. The enemy had no name that could be translated into any civilized language. The council called them the Devourers because that was what they did. They came from the dark spaces between stars, a swarm of machines and twisted flesh that consumed everything in their path. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply ate worlds and moved on to the next target. For 300 years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace among the stars. 57 different species lived together in harmony. Wars were ancient history, something their ancestors had abandoned when they reached for the stars. The Council had built a civilization based on art, science, and philosophy. Their military forces were small, designed only to handle accidents and natural disasters. Real weapons, the kind meant to kill other thinking beings, existed only in museums. Then the Devourers arrived, and the Council learned a terrible truth. Peace only exists when everyone chooses it, and the Devourers did not choose peace. The first battle had been a disaster. The defense fleet approached the enemy with standard peacekeeping procedures. They broadcast greetings in 5,000 languages. They offered aid and resources. They tried to establish communication. The Devourers responded by tearing their ships apart. 3,000 vessels were destroyed in less than an hour. The crews never even understood what killed them. Admiral Fenris, the fleet commander, had been one of the few survivors. He stood now beside Lyran, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. He had not slept properly in weeks. None of them had. "We need to evacuate the core worlds," Fenris said quietly. "We cannot win this fight. Our people were not made for war." "Evacuation to where?" Council Leader Vareth asked from his seat. The old Valorian looked like he had aged 20 years in the last few months. "Every world we abandon, they consume. Every colony we flee, they follow. There is nowhere to run, Fenris. We either find a way to fight or we accept extinction." The word hung in the air like poison: extinction. The end of 57 species. The destruction of everything their civilization had built over thousands of years. All because they had forgotten how to fight, and now faced an enemy that only knew destruction. Lyran had spent weeks searching through the Council databases for any answer. She reviewed every recorded species in the galaxy, looking for anyone who might help. Most advanced species had evolved past violence like the Council had. The few warlike races that still existed were primitive, barely able to leave their own solar systems. Then she found Earth. The file was small, tucked away in the exploration archives. A survey ship had discovered the planet 2 decades ago but kept their distance. The world was marked with warning symbols: dangerous, unstable, not ready for contact. Lyran read the report with growing fascination and horror. Earth was home to a species called humans. They had developed technology, built cities, even achieved spaceflight. But they had not united. Their world was divided into hundreds of competing nations, and they were constantly at war. The survey report documented conflicts that made Lyran's stomach turn. Humans fought over resources, territory, religion, and ideology. They had developed thousands of different ways to kill each other. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, cyber attacks. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. Yet somehow they survived, learned, and kept fighting. The report's conclusion was clear. Humans were too dangerous for contact. Their capacity for violence was unmatched in the known galaxy. They should be quarantined and monitored from a distance until they either matured past their violent phase or destroyed themselves. Lyran read that conclusion 3 times. Too dangerous. Unmatched capacity for violence. She stood up from her research terminal and walked to the nearest window. Outside, she could see the evacuation ships launching from the capital world. Families fleeing with whatever they could carry. Children who would never see their homes again. A civilization dying because they had no capacity for violence. Maybe that was exactly what they needed. The council meeting the next day was the most contentious in their history. Lyran presented her proposal to a chamber full of horrified politicians and military leaders. She showed them the survey data on Earth. She explained human history, their endless wars, their weapons, their tactical thinking. "You want us to contact a species we classified as dangerous?" Council leader Vareth asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "A species that still kills its own kind? Lyran, have you lost your mind?" "I have reviewed every option," Lyran replied calmly. "Every species capable of warfare either destroyed themselves millennia ago or never advanced past their own star systems. Humans are unique. They have fought wars for their entire recorded history, yet they survive. They understand violence in ways we never could. They have developed it into a science. That is exactly why we should not contact them," another counselor argued. "What happens when we bring these violent beings into our space? They could be worse than the Devourers. At least the enemy cannot be reasoned with. Humans might choose to conquer us." Admiral Fenris stood slowly. His uniform was wrinkled, his expression haunted by the battles he had lost. "I have watched our finest ships torn apart by an enemy we do not understand. I have sent thousands to their deaths knowing our tactics were useless. Our people are brave, but we are not warriors. We never needed to be." He paused, looking around the chamber. "Perhaps it is time to ask for help from someone who is." The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for continued evacuation. Others wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. A few suggested hiding in deep space and hoping the Devourers would pass them by. But as each hour passed, more reports came in. More worlds lost. More billions dead. Finally, Council leader Vareth called for a vote. The chamber fell silent as each member entered their decision. Lyran watched the count on her display, her heart's pounding. The votes came in one by one, split almost evenly between yes and no. The final tally appeared: 29 in favor of contact, 28 against. By a single vote, the Galactic Council agreed to contact Earth. Lyran spent the next 3 days preparing the message. It needed to be perfect. Humans did not know about the greater galaxy yet. This would be their first contact with alien life. She needed to explain who they were, what was happening, and what they needed, all without causing panic or misunderstanding. The message was simple in the end. Lyran recorded it herself, standing in the communications chamber with translation software converting her words into the dominant Earth language called English. "People of Earth, my name is Lyran. I represent the Galactic Council, a union of 57 species from across this region of space. We come to you in our darkest hour. An enemy we cannot defeat is destroying our civilization. We have lost millions of lives and hundreds of worlds. Our people do not know how to fight. We have lived in peace for so long that we have forgotten violence. But we know that your species has not. We know that you understand war in ways we cannot. We are asking for your help. We need warriors. We need soldiers. We need people who can teach us to survive. Please, if you can hear this message, help us. Time is running out." She sent the transmission toward Earth and waited. The signal would take hours to reach the small blue world. The response, if any came, would take hours more to return. Lyran sat in the empty communications chamber, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. What if the humans refused? What if they agreed but proved to be conquerors rather than saviors? What if they simply laughed at the peaceful aliens who had forgotten how to defend themselves? But mostly she wondered if the humans would understand what the Council was really asking. They were not asking for teachers or advisors. They were asking for killers. They were asking Earth to send its most dangerous people into the stars to fight a war that was not their own. They were asking for monsters. 16 hours later, the response came. It was a simple text message translated from English. "We read you, Galactic Council. Stand by for diplomatic contact. Help is coming. Earth out." Lyran stared at those words for a long time. Help is coming. 3 simple words that filled her with both hope and fear. The humans were coming. The galaxy's most violent species was about to enter the war. She just hoped they had made the right choice. Because once you invite monsters to your door, you cannot always control what they do after they arrive. But the Devourers were at the gates, and the galaxy was out of options. The call had been made. Earth had answered. Now they would see what humanity's monsters could do when given the stars as their battlefield. Colonel Jake Morrison had seen many strange things in his 20 years of military service, but nothing prepared him for this. He sat in a briefing room deep inside the Pentagon, staring at a holographic image of an alien. An actual alien, The being had silver skin, large dark eyes, and spoke through some kind of translation device that made her words sound almost human. Around the table sat the most powerful military leaders on Earth. General Patricia Vasquez from the United States, Commander Chen Wei from China, General Okonkwo from the African Union, representatives from Russia, Europe, India, and a dozen other nations. For once, they were not arguing about borders or resources. They were all staring at the same impossible thing. Ambassador Lyran finished her presentation and waited. The silence in the room was heavy. She had just told them that aliens existed, that there was a galactic civilization, and that it was being destroyed by an enemy nobody could stop. She had shown them videos of worlds being consumed, of ships being torn apart, of billions dying. Then she had asked Earth for help. "Let me understand this correctly," General Vasquez said slowly. "Your civilization has faster than light travel. You have energy weapons. You have technology that is hundreds of years beyond anything we have, but you never learned how to fight a war." Lyran nodded, her expression uncomfortable. "War is something we evolved past. We have not had armed conflict in over 3 centuries. Our military exists only to help with disasters and exploration. The concept of organized violence between thinking beings is abhorrent to us. And now something is eating your entire civilization," Jake said, leaning forward to study the tactical data on his tablet. "And you want us to help you fight it?" "We need more than help," Lyran admitted. "We need warriors. People who understand combat, who can think like soldiers. Your species has fought wars for your entire history. You understand violence in ways we cannot. We need that understanding. We need human soldiers to lead our forces and teach us how to survive." Commander Chen Wei spoke up, his voice careful. "Ambassador, I mean no disrespect, but why should we help you? We have our own problems here on Earth. We have conflicts, poverty, disease. Why should we send our people to die in a war that has nothing to do with us?" Lyran was quiet for a moment. Then she touched her control device and the display changed. It showed a planet covered in cities with millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Then it showed the same planet 3 days later. The lights were gone. The cities were gone. Everything was ash and fire. "This was Kelrath 7, Lyran said softly, home to 4 billion people. The Devourers consumed it in 72 hours. Every man, woman, and child. Every building, every tree, every living thing. When they finish with our civilization, they will keep moving. Eventually they will reach this part of space. Eventually they will find Earth." The room fell silent again. Jake studied the images, his military mind already calculating. If this enemy could destroy an advanced galactic civilization, what chance did Earth have? Better to fight them now out there than wait for them to arrive at humanity's doorstep. "What do you offer in return?" General Okonkwo asked. "Technology. Resources. Territory. Anything you need," Lyran said immediately. "Medical technology that can cure any disease. Power sources that could solve your energy problems forever. Access to the galactic community. We will share everything if you help us survive." President Helen Carver had been listening quietly from her position at the end of the table. Now she spoke, her voice firm. "If we do this, we need complete operational control. No interference from your council. No politicians second-guessing our commanders in the middle of battle. Our people, our methods, our decisions." "Agreed," Lyran said without hesitation. "And when it's over, we go home." The president continued. "We're not coming as conquerors. We're coming as allies. We help you win this war. You give us the technology you promised, and then we return to Earth." Lyran bowed her head in what Jake recognized as a gesture of respect. "Thank you. You are saving countless lives. Our entire civilization is in your debt." Jake stood up, his jaw set tight. "Don't thank us yet, Ambassador. You asked for soldiers. You're getting something much worse." He looked around the room at the other military leaders. "You're getting 10,000 years of human warfare. Every tactic we learned killing each other, we're going to use on your enemy. Every weapon, every strategy, every dirty trick we know. You called for saviors, Ambassador." He paused at the door, his expression hard. "We're sending our monsters." The next 72 hours were chaos. Every nation on Earth scrambled to put together their best forces. This was not a draft or a requirement. This was volunteers only. And they came by the thousands. Soldiers who wanted to prove themselves. Veterans who missed the action. Young men and women who wanted to be part of history. Within 3 days, 12,000 of Earth's finest warriors had been selected. Jake walked through the staging area where the volunteers were gathering. He saw Army Rangers talking with Navy SEALs, special forces from a dozen nations comparing equipment, pilots arguing about which fighter craft was superior, engineers studying the alien technology manuals that had already been provided. These were professional soldiers, the kind of people who ran toward danger instead of away from it. Lieutenant Commander Danny Price joined him, carrying a thick folder of mission briefs. Danny had been Jake's second in command for 5 years. They had served together in 3 different combat zones. If Jake was leading this mission into space, he wanted Danny beside him. The alien transport ships arrive in 6 hours, Danny said. Command wants your final equipment list. Everything, Jake replied. Every weapon system we have. Every piece of tactical gear. I want explosives, ammunition, medical supplies, communications equipment. If it might be useful in combat, it goes on those ships. The aliens said they have weapons, Danny pointed out. The aliens had weapons designed for mining and construction, Jake corrected, not for war. We'll adapt their technology, but we're bringing our own too. I'm not trusting my people's lives to equipment designed by beings who think violence is abhorrent. Danny nodded and made notes on his tablet. What about rules of engagement? Jake stopped walking and turned to face his friend. The enemy doesn't negotiate. It doesn't surrender. It just consumes everything in its path. Rules of engagement are simple. Protect the civilians, destroy the enemy, come home alive. That's going to be hard to do from a galaxy away. Yeah, Jake agreed quietly. It is. The alien ships arrived exactly on schedule. They were massive vessels, larger than anything humans had ever built. They landed in designated zones across the globe, picking up soldiers and equipment from every participating nation. The technology was incredible. The ships moved without sound, floated without visible engines, and somehow fit thousands of people in spaces that looked too small from the outside. Jake stood in the cargo bay of the lead transport, watching his people board. They came in groups carrying their gear, saying goodbye to families they might never see again. Some were excited. Some were scared. All of them were ready. General Vasquez came to see them off. She saluted Jake, and he returned it sharply. Bring them home, Colonel. I'll do my best, General. That's all any of us can do. She paused, then added quietly, the whole world is watching. This is the first time humanity has fought together for something other than ourselves. Make us proud. Jake nodded but said nothing. Pride was not what he was thinking about. He was thinking about the tactical reports he had studied. The enemy that never tired, never retreated, never stopped. The battles where the aliens lost entire fleets in hours. The billions who had already died. They were taking 12,000 soldiers to fight an enemy that had destroyed a galactic civilization. It seemed insane, but humans had overcome impossible odds before. That was what they did. They adapted. They improvised. They survived. Ambassador Lyran appeared on the boarding ramp, flanked by 2 alien guards. She approached Jake carefully, her movements graceful but nervous. Colonel Morrison, the Council is grateful for your service. They want you to know that you have the full support of every member species. Save your gratitude, Jake said, not unkindly. We haven't done anything yet. Talk to me after we've won a few battles. Of course. Lyran hesitated, then asked, May I ask you something? Why did you volunteer for this? You could have stayed safe on Earth. Why risk your life for people you've never met? Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at his soldiers, at the young men and women boarding the alien ships. Because somebody has to stand against the darkness. Because if we don't help you now, the darkness will eventually come for us. And because, he paused, searching for the right words. Because knowing how to fight and choosing when to fight are 2 different things. We're good at war, Ambassador, too good. Maybe it's time we use that skill to protect someone instead of attacking each other. Lyran's translator device made a soft sound that might have been relief, or hope. Then perhaps there is hope for both our species. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe we'll all die together out there in the dark. Either way, we'll find out soon enough. The last soldiers boarded. The ramps closed. Jake took one final look at Earth through the transport window. The first battle was a disaster waiting to happen, and Captain Lisa Hendricks could see it from a mile away. She stood on the bridge of the alien flagship Starlight Dawn, watching the tactical display with growing horror. The Galactic Defense Fleet was arranging itself in perfect formation, every ship aligned in neat rows like they were preparing for a parade. They were beautiful ships, elegant and gleaming, advancing toward the Devourer swarm with the precision of a dance performance. "They're going to die," Sergeant Marcus Webb said beside her. He was a Marine with 15 years of combat experience, and he knew a death trap when he saw one. "Not if I can help it," Lisa replied. She opened the command channel, not bothering to wait for permission. "All alien vessels, this is Captain Hendricks. Break formation immediately and scatter. Use the asteroid field ahead for cover." There was a moment of confused silence. Then Admiral Fenris responded, his voice uncertain. "Captain Hendricks, our tactical doctrine requires maintained formation for optimal shield harmonics and defensive coverage. Breaking formation would leave gaps in our protection." "Your tactical doctrine was written by people who never fought a real war," Lisa said flatly. "Admiral, those shield harmonics won't mean anything when the enemy surrounds you and tears your ships apart from every angle. Break formation now or you're all dead in 3 minutes." Colonel Morrison's voice cut across the channel. "Admiral Fenris, I'm giving Captain Hendricks tactical command of this engagement." "Follow her orders." There was a long pause. Lisa could almost feel the alien commander's reluctance. His entire military career had been built on following procedures and maintaining order. What she was asking went against everything he knew. But finally his voice came back. "Understood. All ships break formation. Follow the human vessel patterns." The human ships were already moving. They did not fly in neat rows. They scattered like a flock of birds, each pilot using the asteroid field for cover, weaving between rocks, making themselves impossible targets. Lieutenant Ryan Foster led his squadron in a tight spiral, his ship dancing through space with movements that made the alien crews gasp. Ryan had been a fighter pilot before this, flying missions in 3 different war zones on Earth. He knew how to fly when people were trying to kill him. More importantly, he knew how to make his ship a nightmare to hit. The Devourer swarm came at them like a wave of metal and flesh. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all moving with terrifying coordination. They had no individual intelligence, no fear, no hesitation. They just came forward to consume and destroy. The alien ships that had followed Lisa's orders scattered into the asteroids. The ones that hesitated, that tried to maintain formation, died in the first 30 seconds. The Devourers tore through their shields like paper and ripped their hulls apart. Lisa watched 5 ships destroyed before they even fired a shot. "All human units, weapons free," she commanded. "Light them up." The human forces had spent weeks adapting the alien technology. The elegant energy weapons the aliens used for mining and construction had been modified into rapid-fire cannons. The tractor beams meant for cargo handling now grabbed enemy ships and slammed them into asteroids. The mining lasers cut through Devourer armor like butter. Sergeant Webb was manning one of the weapon stations. He had never used alien technology before arriving here, but he learned fast. He targeted a cluster of enemy ships and fired the modified tractor beam. It caught 3 Devourers and crushed them together, their metal bodies crumpling like tin cans. "Got you," he muttered, already swinging to the next target. Lieutenant Karen Brooks led her squad in a maneuver that would have gotten her court-martialed in any standard military. She flew her ship straight at a group of Devourers, let them think they had her surrounded, then fired every weapon at once while spinning in a tight circle. The enemy ships around her exploded in a chain reaction. Her ship took damage, alarms blaring, but she was already retreating behind an asteroid before they could finish her off. "Brooks, report status," Lisa called. "Hull breach on deck 3. Shields at 40% and I need new pants," Karen replied. "But I'm still flying." On another front, Captain Drew Martinez was trying something crazy. He had loaded an old escort ship with explosives and set it on autopilot. He flew it straight into the heart of the enemy formation, waited until they swarmed it like sharks smelling blood, then detonated the reactor remotely, while his entire squadron jumped to faster-than-light speed at the last second. The explosion was massive. 40 enemy vessels were destroyed instantly. Dozens more were damaged and drifting. The Devourers had never encountered a tactic like this. They did not understand the concept of sacrifice plays or bait and switch. They just knew that suddenly a large portion of their force was gone. Admiral Fenris watched from his command ship, his face showing pure shock. That pilot just destroyed his own vessel. That's insane. Colonel Morrison stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the battle unfold on the tactical display. That's human warfare, Admiral. We've been fighting ourselves for 10,000 years. We've learned every dirty trick in the book: ambush tactics, false retreats, sacrifice plays, psychological warfare. We don't fight fair because fair fights get you killed. But the cost, Fenris protested. That ship was worth millions of credits. The resources to build it took years. The crew that would have died on it is worth more, Jake replied. That's something else we learned. Materials can be replaced. People can't. Sometimes you sacrifice equipment to save lives. Sometimes you sacrifice one life to save 100. War isn't about following rules or maintaining dignity. It's about surviving. The battle raged for 6 hours. The human tactics confused and frustrated the Devourers. They were used to enemies that fought in predictable patterns. The aliens always maintained formation, always followed their defensive doctrines, always did exactly what their training told them to do. Humans did none of that. They improvised constantly. They adapted to changing situations. They used the environment as a weapon. Sergeant Marcus Webb ran out of ammunition for the energy cannon and immediately switched to using the tractor beam as a club, grabbing debris and hurling it at enemy ships. When that got too slow, he started grabbing enemy ships themselves and using them as battering rams against their own forces. Lieutenant Foster's squadron discovered that the Devourers had trouble tracking multiple fast-moving targets. So they started flying in chaotic patterns, never the same maneuver twice, constantly changing speed and direction. The enemy weapons could not predict where they would be. Human pilots got hit, but they got hit a lot less than the predictable alien ships, Captain. Lisa Hendricks watched the battlefield and made split-second decisions that would have taken the alien command structure hours to approve. She saw a weakness in the enemy formation and sent 3 squadrons to exploit it before the Devourers could react. She saw one of her ships taking heavy damage and ordered 2 others to cover its retreat, even though it meant pulling them from offensive positions. She made 100 small choices that added up to keeping her people alive. Finally, after 6 brutal hours, the Devourers retreated. They had lost nearly 60% of their attack force. It was the first time in 3 years of warfare that they had been driven back. The alien crews celebrated. They cheered and congratulated each other. They had won their first real victory against the enemy that had been destroying their civilization. The humans did not celebrate. They counted their losses. 800 soldiers had died in the battle. 800 people who had volunteered to fight a war that was not theirs. 800 names that would need to be recorded and remembered. Lisa stood in the memorial bay as the names were read aloud. Every single one. It was a human tradition. You honored your dead. You said their names. You remembered their sacrifice. The aliens watched this ceremony in silence, learning another lesson about the species they had asked for help. Admiral Fenris approached Colonel Morrison after the ceremony. Colonel, I want to apologize. I doubted your tactics. I thought they were reckless and wasteful. But you saved thousands of lives today, my people included. Don't apologize for being cautious, Jake said. That's what kept your civilization peaceful for centuries. But peace and war require different thinking. In peace, you can take time to consider every option and choose the most elegant solution. In war, you have to make the best choice you can with incomplete information and hope you're right. You have to be willing to break your own rules if it saves lives. How do you live like that? Fenris asked quietly. How do you make decisions knowing people will die because of your choices? Jake was silent for a long moment, staring at the wall where the names of the dead were now displayed. You don't get used to it. Every loss hurts. Every name on that wall is a person I sent into danger. But the alternative is worse. If I hesitate, if I second-guess myself in the moment, more people die. So you make the hard choices and you live with the weight of them. That's what command means. Fenris looked at the human colonel with new understanding. Your species frightens me, Colonel Morrison. Your capacity for violence, your willingness to sacrifice, the way you think about warfare like it's a science. But I'm also grateful. Without you. 6 months into the campaign, the war had changed. The human-trained forces were pushing the Devourers back, reclaiming lost colonies, saving millions of lives. But Dr. Claire Stevens could see the real cost every single day. She walked through the medical bay of the orbital station above Valthor Prime, moving from bed to bed. Her training as a trauma surgeon had prepared her for terrible injuries, but nothing quite like this. She had spent years in war zones on Earth, patching up soldiers in field hospitals where supplies were limited and time was measured in seconds. Now she was doing the same thing, just in space. A young Marine named Billy Cooper lay on one of the beds, his left arm gone below the elbow. A Devourer weapon had taken it during the battle for Station Outpost 7. Claire checked his vitals and adjusted his medication, The alien medical technology was incredible. It could heal injuries that would have been fatal on Earth. But it could not grow back limbs, and it could not heal the look in Billy's eyes. "How you feeling, Cooper?" she asked gently. "Like I want to go home, Doc," he replied, his voice tired. "Like I want to see my mom and tell her I'm okay even though I'm not." Claire had no good answer for that. She squeezed his remaining hand and moved to the next patient. There were always more patients. The battles kept coming and people kept getting hurt. In the debriefing room 3 levels down, Major Kevin Torres sat alone, reviewing after-action reports. His unit had just retaken the mining colony on Kelrath 7. It should have been a victory. They had saved 3,000 colonists and driven the Devourers off the planet. But the fighting had been brutal. House to house, room to room. Close quarters combat where every corner could hide an enemy. Torres had lost 32 soldiers in that operation. 32 people who had trusted him to lead them. He knew all their names. He had written letters to their families trying to explain how they died heroically. But heroic deaths were still deaths, and the words felt hollow in his mouth. Lieutenant Amy Chen entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of Torres and sat down across from him. Amy had been with his unit since the beginning. She was a good officer, steady under pressure, the kind of person soldiers trusted. "The colonists are calling us heroes," Amy said quietly. "They want to throw us a celebration." "We're not heroes," Torres replied, not looking up from his reports. "We're just people doing a job. A bloody, terrible job. The colonists don't see it that way." "We saved their lives." Torres finally looked at her. "Did you see the way they looked at us?" "Yes, they're grateful. But they're also afraid. They see human soldiers covered in blood, carrying weapons that can level buildings, speaking in military terms they don't understand. They're grateful we're on their side, but they're scared of what we are." Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe that's the price of being good at this. We saved them, but they'll always remember that we're dangerous." Back in the medical bay, Claire finished her rounds and headed to her small office. She was exhausted. They all were. 6 months of constant combat, endless casualties, and the work never stopped. She sat down at her desk and stared at the reports. Human casualties were approaching 3,000 dead. 3,000 soldiers who had come to save strangers and never made it home. The alien casualties were lower, surprisingly. The human tactics and training had made them more effective and safer. But Claire knew the real reason for the difference. Humans took the dangerous assignments. Humans led the charges. Humans volunteered for the missions with the lowest survival rates. It was not because they were ordered to. It was because that was what soldiers did. They protected others even at the cost of themselves. Ambassador Lyran found Colonel Morrison in the observation deck, his usual spot when he needed to think. Through the massive window, Earth was visible as a small blue dot in the distance. Even from light years away, it drew the eye. "Home. Colonel, the Council wants to present your forces with honors," Lyran said, approaching carefully. "The Star of Valor. It is our highest commendation." Morrison did not turn away from the window. "Will that bring back Captain Hendricks? She died last week holding the line at Tarsus Station so your civilians could evacuate." Lyran felt the words like a physical blow. Lisa Hendricks had been a good officer, a brilliant tactician. She had saved thousands of alien lives in her 6 months of service. And now she was gone, killed by an enemy that would never know her name. "I know," Lyran said softly, "and we are grateful beyond words." "Grateful?" Morrison's voice was sharp. He turned to face her. "You're grateful that we're good at killing? That we've turned your perfect, peaceful civilization into a war zone? Ambassador, we're doing what you asked, but don't mistake what we are. We're not heroes. We're the violent species you spent your entire history learning to avoid. And when this is over, you'll go back to being peaceful, and we'll be the scary story you tell your children." Lyran was silent for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "Colonel, before humans arrived, we believed we would lose. We had calculated the odds. The Devourers would consume our civilization within 2 years. We had accepted it. We were preparing to die with dignity." She moved to stand beside him at the window. "Then you came. Yes, you fight in ways that disturb us. Yes, you are capable of violence we cannot understand, but you also volunteer to die for people you just met. You mourn your losses and keep fighting. You teach us not just tactics but courage. You show us that being willing to fight and choosing what to fight for are not the same thing." Morrison was quiet, staring at Earth. "There's a saying back home, only the dead have seen the end of war. We've lived with that truth for our entire history as a species. Maybe that makes us monsters, or maybe that's what makes us the only ones who could answer your call." "Perhaps you are both," Lyran said. "Monsters and saviors. The galaxy will debate that question for generations. But right now, in this moment, you are the reason billions of people are still alive." In the crew quarters, Sergeant Marcus Webb sat with a group of soldiers, both human and alien. They were playing cards, a simple Earth game that the aliens had picked up quickly. It was a small moment of peace in the middle of a war. One of the alien soldiers, a young Valorian named Kess, asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Sergeant Webb, why do humans fight so well? What makes you so good at warfare?" Marcus thought about it while dealing another hand. "It's not that we're good at it. It's that we've had a lot of practice. Humans have been fighting wars since before we could write. We fought over food, over land, over ideas, over gods. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. But we learned from every fight. We adapted. We survived. But at what cost?" Another alien asked. "Your history is filled with terrible violence. Millions dead in your wars. Entire cities destroyed." "Yeah," Marcus agreed quietly. "The cost was high, too high. But here's the thing we learned. All that violence, all those wars, they taught us something important. They taught us that fighting is sometimes necessary, but it should never be easy. Every loss should hurt. Every death should matter. When killing becomes easy, when you stop caring about the cost, that's when you become the monster for real." He laid down his cards. "We fight well because we know what war costs. We've paid that price over and over, and maybe because we know the cost. We know when something is worth fighting for. Your people, your civilization, the billions of innocent lives at stake. That's worth it. That's worth being monsters for." The alien soldiers were quiet, thinking about his words. War was still foreign to them, still disturbing. But they were beginning to understand why humans approached it the way they did. Not with joy or excitement, but with grim determination and a deep respect for what was being sacrificed. Dr. Claire Stevens returned to the medical bay for the night shift. More wounded had come in from the latest battle. She moved between beds, treating injuries, offering comfort where medicine could not help. A young alien soldier held her hand while she treated his burns, terrified and in pain. Claire stayed with him until he fell asleep, then moved to the next patient. This was the reality that the politicians and council members did not see. They saw victories on tactical displays. They saw planets reclaimed and colonies saved. They did not see the broken bodies, the trauma, the soldiers who would never be the same. They did not see the human doctors who worked until they collapsed, the medics who ran into fire to drag wounded soldiers to safety, the psychiatrists who helped people cope with horrors that peaceful species had no words for. Major Torres finished his reports and headed to the memorial wall. It had grown longer in the past months, names upon names of soldiers who had died in this war. He found the newest additions, the 32 from his last mission, and read each name silently. He had promised himself he would never forget them, that their deaths would mean something. Lieutenant Amy Chen joined him at the wall. They stood together in silence, honoring the dead in the way soldiers always had, not with grand speeches or elaborate ceremonies, but with quiet remembrance and the determination to keep fighting so their sacrifice would not be wasted. Colonel Morrison remained in the observation deck long after Ambassador Lyran left. He thought about the soldiers under his command, the ones who had died and the ones still fighting. The final battle came 8 months after humans first arrived in the galaxy. Intelligence reports had finally located the source of the Devourer swarm. It was not a planet in the traditional sense. It was something worse. A massive construct in deep space. A twisted amalgamation of consumed worlds fused together by the enemy's terrible technology. Billions of Devourers spawned from this nightmare structure, spreading across the galaxy like a plague. General Patricia Vasquez stood in the command center of the flagship Defiant Hope, looking at the tactical display. Every human ship, every trained alien unit, every weapon and strategy they had developed over 8 months of brutal warfare, all of it was coming together for one massive assault. This was the largest military operation in human history, and they were doing it for another species. "All units report ready, General," Lieutenant Commander Danny Price said from his station. His voice was calm, but she could hear the tension underneath. Everyone knew what was at stake. If they failed here, the war would continue for years. More worlds would fall, more billions would die. Begin the operation, Patricia ordered. All forces, commence attack. The human fleet moved first, breaking into scattered formations that the aliens had learned to copy. They did not advance in neat lines. They came from multiple directions, using asteroids and debris as cover, making themselves difficult targets. Behind them came the mixed units, alien crews trained in human tactics, no longer flying with parade ground precision, but with the chaotic effectiveness of warriors who had learned to survive. Captain Ryan Foster led his squadron in the opening strike. His fighters screamed through space, dodging defensive fire, planting massive explosives on the outer shell of the construct. Each bomb was powerful enough to level a city. They planted 100 of them in the first 15 minutes. Charges set, Ryan reported. Getting out of here. But the Devourers were not going to let them leave easily. Thousands of enemy ships poured from the construct like angry hornets from a disturbed nest. The defensive screen lit up with targets. So many targets that the tactical computers could not count them all. Here they come, Sergeant Marcus Webb said from his weapons station. He did not sound scared. He sounded focused, ready. This was what they had trained for. Let's give them hell. The space battle was massive and chaotic. Human pilots flew patterns that seemed insane but kept them alive. Marine boarding teams in powered armor fought through the twisted corridors of the construct, pushing toward the core. Every meter was contested. Every room was a fight. The Devourers threw everything they had at the invaders, but humans had fought in worse conditions. They had stormed beaches under machine gun fire. They had fought in cities that were nothing but rubble. They knew how to push forward when everything wanted them dead. Commander Nina Lopez led her engineering team deep into the construct's heart. They carried with them a weapon that Earth's governments had banned decades ago. It was a bomb so powerful that it could crack a planet's crust. They had rebuilt it for this mission, modified it to work on the alien technology that powered the Devourer homeworld. 5 minutes to core, Nina reported, her team fighting through another wave of enemies. 2 of her engineers went down, killed by Devourer weapons. She kept moving. There was no time to mourn, not yet. We need cover fire at Junction 7. Major Kevin Torres and his unit were already there, holding the position against overwhelming numbers. His soldiers fought with the desperate intensity of people who knew they were buying time with their lives. Every second they held was another second for the bomb team to reach their target. Go, Torres shouted to Nina's team. We've got you covered. The engineering team ran past carrying their terrible cargo. Torres turned back to the fight, firing his weapon until it overheated, then switching to another. Beside him, Lieutenant Amy Chen coordinated defensive positions, her calm voice a steady anchor in the chaos. Left flank collapsing, someone reported. Reinforce it, Amy ordered. Nobody gets through. Not until that bomb is planted. In orbit above the construct, the space battle raged on. Captain Drew Martinez pulled off another crazy maneuver, using his damaged ship as a decoy to draw enemy fire away from the troop transports. His shields failed. His hull breached. He kept flying, kept fighting until his ship finally gave out. He ejected at the last second, his escape pod picked up by a friendly ship. Barely. The evacuation order came with 10 minutes to detonation. Nina's team had planted the bomb at the core. It was armed and counting down. Now they needed to get everyone out before the entire construct exploded. All forces begin immediate withdrawal, General Vasquez ordered. I say again, all forces withdraw now. But not everyone could make it out. The fighting was too intense, the enemy too numerous. Some units were cut off deep inside the construct. Some ships were too damaged to jump to faster than light speed. They knew what that meant. They would die when the bomb went off. Captain Ryan Foster's voice came across the command channel. His fighter had taken critical damage during the bombing run. His engines were dead. He was trapped in the debris field surrounding the construct. Command, this is Foster. I'm not making it out. Tell my family I did my job. Ryan, we're coming back for you, someone said. Negative, Ryan replied firmly. You don't have time. Get everyone else out. That's an order. He paused, then added more softly. It's been an honor flying with you all. 300 human soldiers stayed behind, either unable to evacuate or choosing to hold positions so others could escape. They knew it was a one-way mission the moment they volunteered. Some made final calls to loved ones back on Earth. Some recorded messages for their families. Some just kept fighting until the end, making sure every last evacuating ship made it to safety. Sergeant Marcus Webb was among those who stayed. His transport had been hit, leaving him stranded on the construct's outer shell. He could see the evacuation ships departing in the distance. He sat down, checked his weapon one last time, and watched the stars. It was not a bad view for a final moment. "Earth Actual, this is Webb," he said into his communicator. "Target destroyed. Mission accomplished. It's been a hell of a ride." The Devourer construct collapsed in on itself as the bomb detonated. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The artificial gravity well that powered the structure failed catastrophically, consuming everything. The Devourer's ability to spawn new forces was destroyed. The threat to the galaxy was ended. The cost was high. 5,847 human soldiers were dead. Thousands more were wounded. An entire generation of Earth's finest warriors had been spent on a war that was not their own. 2 months later, Colonel Jake Morrison stood before the Galactic Council for the final time. The human expeditionary force was going home. The war was over. The Council offered them anything they wanted as reward: technology that could transform Earth, territory in space, membership in the galactic community as honored members. Jake declined it all. "We came because you needed help," he said simply. "We're leaving because the job is done. Keep your technology. We'll develop our own in time. Keep your territory. We have our own world to protect. We don't need rewards for doing what was right." Council Leader Vareth stood, his old face showing deep emotion. "Colonel Morrison, your people saved our civilization. How can we possibly repay such a debt?" "Remember what you learned," Jake replied. "Peace is worth fighting for, but it can't be maintained by people who forget that evil exists. You needed monsters to save you this time. Make sure there's not a next time. Build defenses. Train your people. Don't ever be helpless again." He paused, looking around the chamber at the alien faces watching him. "And remember the humans who died here. Remember that they had families back home. Remember that they volunteered to save strangers. Remember that monsters can choose to be saviors. That's all we ask." As the human ships prepared to depart, Ambassador Lyran stood on an observation platform watching them go. Admiral Fenris joined her, his expression thoughtful. "I was terrified of them when they arrived," Fenris admitted. "Their weapons, their tactics, the way they accepted casualties that would have broken our forces. But now I understand. They are dangerous, yes, but danger directed at evil is called courage. Violence in defense of the innocent is called justice." "They gave us more than victory," Lyran said quietly. "They showed us that strength and compassion are not opposites. That the ability to destroy and the choice to protect can exist in the same being. They are monsters because they are very good at war, but they are heroes because they chose to fight for others." The last human transport engaged its faster-than-light drive and disappeared in a flash of light. The galaxy fell quiet. The war was over. Peace had returned, bought with human blood and sacrifice. In the years that followed, the Galactic Council built a memorial on their capital world. It was a simple structure of black stone, listing every name of every human who had died in what became known as the Salvation War. At the base, an inscription in both Galactic Common and English read, "They were not our people. They were not our species. But when we called for help, they came. They fought, they died, not for glory, not for reward, but because someone had to stand against the darkness